you. All right, I'm live too. Hey, welcome to the show. This is an impromptu episode of the Binary Business Show. I've got myself, Logan Edmonds, CEO of TTS, and I am joined by Todd Thorson. Todd, go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
Absolutely. My name is Todd Thorson. I am CEO and president of Tange Cybersecurity and Technologies here in the lovely suburbs of Chicago.
Nice. So, 23andMe. I'm pretty sure I've heard of these guys for over a decade now, and they have been something that scratches the paranoid itch in the back of my brain every time I think of them. What about you?
You know, you can get yourself a new social security number, a new credit card, a new checking account. You cannot change your DNA or fingerprint or anything else. So this is important.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it's an important thing that a lot of people don't think about. They get so excited about doing things where they're finding out their lineage or more information about their history, but how can that information either be monetized or weaponized against us is a big concern.
Yeah, 23andMe, I mean, for those of you who have been living under a rock and never heard of them, you basically send a swab of your spit in, and the idea is they can tell you where you're from, right? Your genetic history, whether you're from, like Todd there, with this rich, thick red mane of hair from the Isles of Ireland, or yeah, that's right, Isles of Ireland. Nah, I don't think I got that right. But the joke stands. You can see where you're from. I'd say the biggest thing about genetic data, in my opinion, that makes me really nervous is I don't have to opt in for someone to get full access to my genetic profile. All it takes is a close enough family member participating, right? If your cousin participates and does a 23andMe test, they essentially have your genetic profile because your DNA, from a statistical standpoint, compared to your cousin's, is almost identical. You're only one branch removed. So my dad had a lot of siblings on just my dad's side of family alone. I think I've got 49 different cousins. That leaves a lot of opportunity for me to lose control of my data. Well, why are we talking about 23andMe? Well, the big headline, if you've been living under a rock, I haven't heard of it, and I'm going to share our screen here, Todd. 23andMe declares bankruptcy, and this is Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So they are not restructuring. They are selling off the assets. They want to recoup any losses. First and foremost, yay, right? This is never a great story. But I think the thing that raised the eyebrows the most for me, Todd, was if you scroll down here, and I'm going to highlight this, the Office of California's Attorney General also reacted to the news and issued a consumer alert advising 23andMe customers to ask the company to delete their data, destroy their test samples, and revoke permission for their data to be used for research. I'm going to read in between the lines and say California is worried that 23andMe is going to sell all that genetic data as part of the asset sell-off. What do you think?
100%. I mean, the reality is that genetic testing has already made massive strides even since the 90s, right, or 2000s. And that's only going to get better. And there is so much stuff that you can tell about a person based on their genetic profile. This isn't just trying to figure out the neat part of like historically where your family came from. There could be certain illnesses you might be prone to. How could that affect your job prospects in the future? How could someone else have that information as these DNA things get better and better to be able to use the profile they already have against you?
I think that one of the things that terrifies me, and it's not a story related to 23andMe. So 23andMe has been around since 2007. They've been around for a while. But when you read about the stories of post 9/11 and the war on terrorism, right? One of the main ways these guys figured out, like our soldiers, our intelligence figured out where terrorists were hiding. Waste. They figured out, hey, these terrorists have cousins, uncles, a brother, that's estranged. They got through intelligence, various counterintelligence strategies, a copy of that DNA, and they just started screening wastewater, looking for matches of that DNA in an area they thought a terrorist might be heading out until they got a hit. And they were able to circumvent all the security these terrorists were put in place to protect where they were at just by tracking where their DNA was originating from on the waste side of things. I mean, it was just so shockingly simple, but so like I can't think of a way to get around that, right? Like there was no way to get around that strategy. There was ways and they went with it. It was brutally effective and brutally simple. And that's just one of the ways this thing can be weaponized, right? And that's a military application. I get worried about identity and DNA being tied up, right? There's all kinds of things. You can get addiction profiles pulled off of this thing. You can find relatives out. That was actually, so let's talk about 23andMe's data breach, right? About 2 years ago, 23andMe, I don't know, has it been 2 years already?
Mm-hmm.
It's been 2 years, hasn't it?
I think it was 22 or 23.
Yeah, 23andMe fell for a pretty simple data attack called credential stuffing. Todd, are you familiar with credential stuffing?
Well, why don't you explain it to me, Logan, so that we can make sure everybody at home understands it.
I was going to have you explain. Okay, man, he just reverse Uno'd me. Okay, so credential stuffing is a pretty simple cyber attack. Basically, you take a whole spreadsheet or database full of passwords that are commonly used, right? And this stuff exists in galore, even in the open free market. Go look up John the Ripper if you want to see what I'm talking about. Like, this stuff is easy to find. And you just start plugging away at those passwords on an open interface on the internet, right? Until you get a match. Unfortunately, good news is there's ways to protect against that a company or a service can implement to mitigate that risk. The bad news was that 23andMe did none of that. And this attack vector has been around for over a decade. So it was pretty bad. It got so bad that 23andMe, not only did they lose all their genetic data, or at least we're still not sure about the total amount. We know we lost a lot. We also know that for some reason, the attackers, at least in the first round, were looking for genetic information related to people of specific Jewish ancestry. So read into that what you will. I'm not going way further on that. But the 23andMe got sued, and they agreed to pay a $30 million settlement. Go figure. Yeah, of course they got sued. But 23andMe also made the strategic decision, and they were very criticized about it, to update their terms and conditions arbitrarily. So when you accept those terms and conditions, a lot of people won't know. There's language in there saying, I also accept any future updates that you push out. Or I can make it as simple to accept those updates as clicking a button in my email without ever reading it, because who reads terms and conditions? God forbid. And they updated it to make it more difficult to sue them. Added a lot of forced arbitration and more difficult arbitration processes. And the current scuttlebutt at the time when this happened was they're just trying to stem the bleeding, right? Well, here we are. They did that in November of 2023. And 2025, what are we, March? 18 months later. I think there might have been something there. I did read this carefully, though. I don't see this article alleging this is directly due to the data breach. I've seen a lot of talking heads on the internet saying, hey, this is because they got hacked and they're going out of business because they got hacked. Do you think that holds any merit?
Well, I don't think it helps your reputation when you get hacked, ever. I don't think this type of publicity falls under the any news is good news, even bad, right, in terms of publicity or marketing. I just think that there is so much negative stigma around a data breach, justifiably so, that it will hurt your business. And if you do not protect yourself trying to close the barn doors after the horses have run out, it's just, it does not help. It is not a good business strategy for sure. And while it may not be directly related, they certainly weren't booming business after the data breach such that they would be filing bankruptcy.
Honestly, in my mind, it felt like we crossed the line with this data breach. What I mean by that is people are kind of numb when they hear about their stuff getting hacked in a lot of cases, right? Like it just happens so much. But DNA, genetics, that's so horrendously intimate to who you are. That seemed to cross some kind of unspoken line in people's psyche. I saw a tremendous amount of lashback against 23andMe. I saw one of the most popular YouTube doctors do a whole episode. Dr. Mike, if you ever watch his stuff, it's pretty funny to watch his React videos. I like his React on South Park. Watching a doctor try to translate South Park episodes to actual clinical stuff he accounts was pretty fun to watch. It's not easy. He works for it. But he did a whole episode. I remember seeing this and thinking, wow, this dude's not anywhere near cybersecurity, doesn't deal with data breaches. And he's saying, stay away from these companies. And 23andMe was his poster child because you can't control what they do with your data. And this data can wreck your life, like in so many different levels. I mean, you can get, he used a specific example. There is ways to manipulate genetic tests to make them tell you a certain story. The data is subjective in the sense that how you read it, interpret it. So he was referencing a story of like there's these genetic tests now that tell you whether or not you're at a prediction for the Alzheimer's gene, for colon cancer, all this other stuff. And a lot of these companies weaponize readings of these data, right, to kind of scare you into further treatments or sell that data out to people. And this is just the next evolution, right? Like imagine you never took a genetic test. Next thing you know, you're getting bombarded with cold callers saying, we can see you have the genetic marker for colon cancer, whether or not you do. You probably should buy our crap and they'll test for you, or you could die. Like, I just see this becoming a huge privacy nightmare.
Well, think about how somebody might weaponize that very same thing with the CEO of a company to affect the stock price or a merger or a buyout, right? To be able to have that information on that person.
Drop the founder's genetic profile. Hey, you really want to trust this guy? He has the Alzheimer's gene, just for example. Like, I could absolutely see that happening where it's a smear campaign, but now this data is just out there.
It's not going to help your stock price, even if it's incorrect.
Yeah. And I would say the other thing I worry about, the insurance world. If you're any kind of like insuring people, whether health insurance or otherwise, the physical fitness of somebody is a big indicator, right? And we have tons of rules around insurance. And disclaimer, neither you or I are licensed insurance agents. We're speaking in generics based on publicly available data. But there's a lot of regulation out there to prevent insurance from getting too invasive, to keep the playing field fair, right? Because it's meant to be a financial backstop for complete ruin for a lot of different things. Life insurance, health insurance, obviously. You can have, insurance for professional liability, as an example. If we don't know how to track this data, if it's just floating out there, right? It's dumped in the dark web and anybody can read it. How are we supposed to enforce an insurance carrier from scraping that data in any way, shape, or form, right? Like, I'm not saying they would. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we have no way to stop it.
Or just buying it.
Or just buying it. Yeah.
Yeah, give it to their actuaries to figure out their costs. I just don't understand the, coming back and saying, well, go back and tell them to delete your data. What is probably not in the terms and conditions or addressable is, what about all the backups they have?
The fact that I think and this is probably going to happen, and I just don't see how they're going to enforce it. I think the reason the Attorney General's office, and this is a professional opinion, this is not based on any data. This is just based on, I have common sense and I deal a lot with cyber stuff, right? Especially in the litigation side. I think California's setting themselves up to have a case, right? Like, whoever buys this data, hey, this data was supposed to be deleted. The problem is they're declaring Chapter 11 bankruptcy, right? Like, the shareholders aren't going to be held liable for that. They're bankrupt, or the board of directors or the C-suite executive. Like, how is anyone supposed to pursue civil liability if they don't abide by these requests, right? Like, no, that's kind of the whole point of bankruptcy. It literally shields you, or I should say it puts you in line for assets. The best that California could hope for is they get quick enough, they might get a portion of the proceeds that 23andMe is going to make selling off all of the assets, which is what they're telling people. Delete the asset. It doesn't make sense.
Right. That's what I'm saying is, so who's going to benefit? All the attorneys that are drawing the lawsuits are going to benefit, and the holding company will be required to liquidate the assets for the most amount of money. And when they do that, right, they're going to be liquidating the very data that we're talking about in order to monetize that. And that, I think, is the scariest part for anybody that's thinking about the fact that they've already done this with 23andMe, or if they're considering any other services similar to this in the future. I'm not sure that the value of finding out that you're 6% Norwegian is really worth the risk of having this genetic profile used, sold.
I also know how popular these things are, and I don't have data to back this up. I wish there was a study I could reference, but there is every chance if you're watching this, whether or not you participated, you're already caught up in this, right? Like, that's just how genetics work. It's why they use it in the court of law, right? We can tell very carefully not only who you are, but where you're related, everything else. Like, it's so horrendously tied up to who you are as a person. Like, talk about blending the digital and the physical, right? I can't think of a better analogy of where digital and physical have total the lines blurred to the point where you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. Then, hey, my genetic sequence, which has been codified and made readable, is now floating out in the ether for anybody who wants it. Or more importantly, if someone might be buying it and I can't even track because how these proceeds will work. I mean, a lot of times it's a shell company of a shell company of a shell company that places the purchase order, and you put enough obscurity there. And it's legal, 100% legal. You can make holding companies legally in the United States. You can't tell who the ultimate buyer is. This could be clinical labs that want to run data of their drug trials. This could be, as we mentioned before, marketers who want to prey on genetic predispositions and get that list. I mean, I think on the surface, the biggest challenge I have describing this, Todd, between you and I, is how bad this truly is for the average person. Like, when you just say, hey, your DNA has been lost, right? That doesn't tell you anything about how bad this gets until you start painting the examples of how this information can be abused. And it's just, I could sit here all day with you listing out all the ways it could be abused.
Sadly, that's the truth, right? And some of those are just legal ways, not even the criminal ways that it can be used.
No. Medical impersonation, Medicare fraud is, I mean, there's, you can defraud somebody on so many levels if you know enough about the medical wheel space, if you have access to their patient data. That is a big reason why when we deal with things like HIPAA and we deal with things like medical data, why they're in their own little classification, right? Like, they can be horrendously abused when handled by the right actor with the right malicious intent. That's the worst part of this. I don't have a solution. I always like to come on these calls like, hey, this is what you should do. And if you're a 23andMe customer, absolutely go delete your stuff like as best you can. I think actually Rachel Toback, who I like, Rachel's cool. I'll put the article back up. They took a screenshot in this article of what she said you should do. Here it is. Here's the step-by-step instruction. I'll try to zoom in a little bit. Log in the 23andMe account. Go to settings, scroll to 23andMe data at the bottom, click view next to 23andMe data, scroll to delete data, click the confirmation that you want to permanently delete your data. And then once you receive an email from 23andMe, it's going to be a confirmation email saying, are you sure you want to delete it? Confirm your deletion request. Those are the steps right now. Do it, to be clear. It can't hurt you. It can only help, in my opinion.
Right.
I just, like you said, Todd, I don't have confidence that this is actually going to get deleted. I don't have confidence this data is going to be handled correctly. I mean, why would a bankrupt company that's already on its way out the door handle a deluge of deletion requests, right? Like, any kind of level of due diligence. I mean, I'm not trying to speak ill of 23andMe and their staff. That's not what I mean by that. I'm just speaking from any company, right? I mean, the CEO stepped down. She wants to acquire. There's a whole bunch of drama there. Most companies, they go in that situation, they just want to tread water until the bankruptcy sale is finalized.
Right. And the holding company would own all the assets, which would include all the existing backups. When you click delete, it's only deleting the current copy, maybe.
Yeah.
It's not deleting the past, the annual backup, the monthly backups, whatever else they might have been doing.
I mean, data like this at a company like 23andMe, it's going to be in multiple databases, not just one. And that's the worst part about this. What level of due diligence do you expect a company going through bankruptcy proceedings of high? Because I mean, most companies do this kind of level of due diligence. We're talking about, I would assume, a significant portion of users at the highlight of the media coverage going and saying, delete my stuff. Like, that is not a small undertaking. And typically in an event like this, I would expect a company to hire outside help to kind of make sure it's done correctly. And that outside help, as you and I know, is not cheap. I just don't see a bankruptcy company going through all those hoops. Maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I am, but I don't see it.
No. And you're going to have multiple assets, right? I'm sure they're taking down space in various data centers around the world. And when they don't pay the data centers for that rack space, and now they owe money to the data centers, they may take those assets in exchange for the rent that hasn't been paid and say, well, fine, we're just going to keep your servers you have racked up here. What's going to happen to the data on those replicas of the databases and information?
This is one of the most depressing data breach stories I've ever had to do. I really feel that way. Like, there's just no good answer. Credit monitoring is not going to save you. Going and doing security better down the road is not going to save you. And to be clear, we still think you should do that. But this is just going to be, you're up there's no real way to govern this. We've never really grappled with this question as a world. I don't know a single country that has any kind of regulation that could properly handle this situation, because genetic sequencing testing is only about 15 years old. And this is the first real big titan I've seen in the industry fall. And we know there are others, and no company lives forever. I don't know if we're prepared for this.
Agreed.
Someone told me once that companies are like people. They usually have an average lifespan if they're lucky. Some are shorter than others, but no company lives forever. I mean, unless I guess you're the East India Company, which even they eventually went out. So, all right, Todd, takeaways here. Go delete your stuff. Don't do genetic testing. And as always, your level of paranoia probably should be a tiny bit higher than it actually is. We don't recommend undue paranoia, but being a little paranoid, a little cautious, it really can't hurt in this day and age.
Yep. With anything biometric, like I said in the beginning, you can get a new credit card, you get a new checking account, you can get a new social security number. You can't get a new face, fingerprint, or DNA. So we need to be way more diligent and careful about that kind of information.
Fun fact, you get a second social security number when you work for the IRS, I found out.
I was not aware of that.
It's a little tidbit of the day. Someone told me that a while ago who works at the IRS, and I'm inclined to believe them.
Interesting.
Apparently, it makes tracking a lot easier. All right. I'm Logan Edmond, CEO of TTS Cyber. Go ahead and sign off, Todd.
Todd Thorson from TAN Cybersecurity and Technology. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Have a great day. Stay safe. Stay paranoid. Take care, everyone.